The rain hammers against the bakery window like a fist demanding entry. 2:47 in the morning. The street is empty except for the sound of bare feet slapping wet pavement, and then a child's voice, thin, shattered, barely human. Emma Caruso runs barefoot down Harbor Street in a soaked pink nightgown, her dark hair plastered to her face, her small body heaving with sobs so violent she cannot catch her breath. She is 6 years old. She has been missing for 18 months. Sofia Morgan does not think. The moment she hears that cry, her body moves without permission from her mind. She drops the 2 grocery bags she has been carrying, $40 in canned beans and rice, food that will stretch across 8 days if she rations carefully. $78 remain in her pocket. $78 between her and the street. She abandons the bags on the sidewalk and runs toward the sound. Emma collapses into Sofia's arms like a puppet with its strings cut. The child's skin is ice. Sofia can feel the girl's ribs through the thin fabric of the nightgown, each bone distinct beneath her trembling hands. Sofia wraps her own jacket around Emma, the jacket she has owned for 3 years, the jacket that keeps her alive on nights when the shelter reaches capacity and she sleeps in her rusted Honda Civic parked at the Harbor Street shelter lot, the only home she has known for 8 weeks. "Please," Emma whispers into Sofia's chest. "Please don't let them find me." Thunder splits the sky. The storm swallows her words. Sofia pulls the child deeper into the doorway of the closed bakery, pressing Emma against the brick wall, shielding the girl's body with her own. She has no apartment. She has no money. She has nothing in this world except the clothes on her back and a backpack containing everything she owns. But she has arms. And in this moment, these arms are all that stands between this child and the dark. "You are safe," Sofia whispers. "I promise. You are safe now." Emma does not believe her. But she stops running. Across the city, in a penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Caruso building in downtown Boston, Luca Caruso sits motionless in an Italian leather chair that costs more than Sofia Morgan earns in a year. The chair is black. His suit is black. Everything about him is darkness wrapped in tailored fabric and controlled rage. He is 47 years old but looks carved from stone. His face is broad, severe, with sharp cheekbones and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, a reminder of a war fought in the streets when he was young enough to still believe in justice. His eyes are the color of a storm gathering over the ocean. Dark. Calculating. Never kind. On the desk in front of him lies a photograph printed on photo paper. The girl in the image is 6 years old with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. Emma. His daughter. The only piece of his heart that still beats outside his chest. The photograph has been on his desk for 18 months. 18 months of searching. 18 months of every resource in his empire turned toward a single goal: find her. Every law enforcement contact he owns, every informant from here to Providence, every street camera hacked and analyzed. 18 months of watching and waiting. And tonight, finally, Bruno enters the office with news that changes everything. "We have her location," Bruno says. His voice is low, careful, the tone of a man who has learned never to deliver incomplete information to Luca Caruso. She has been at Harbor Street shelter for 3 weeks. She is with a woman. A delivery driver named Sofia Morgan. Luca does not move. The silence in the room becomes a living thing. "Show me," he says. Bruno hands him the phone. On the screen is footage from a security camera mounted on the corner of Harbor Street and Atlantic Avenue. Timestamp, 2:43 a.m. A small figure in a pink nightgown runs through the rain. Then another figure, taller, moving toward the child. A woman in a stained uniform pulls the child into her arms. Luca watches the woman shield his daughter from the storm. He watches her wrap her own jacket around the girl. He watches her whisper something into Emma's hair. Whatever she says, the child stops running. The child stops screaming. The child leans into her like she belongs there. "Who is she?" Luca's voice is like thunder rolling across still water. "Sofia Morgan." 28 years old. No criminal record. No family. She works as a delivery driver for Benedetti's Pizza on Massachusetts Avenue. 3 shifts a week. She makes approximately $9,000 a year, which she does not make because she is fired every other month for reasons the employers will not specify. Luca's jaw tightens. His scar whitens. And the shelter. She has been living there for 8 weeks. Staff report she sleeps in her car most nights. She has befriended the child, Emma, who arrived at the shelter 3 weeks ago with no identification and no memory of her past. Emma stopped speaking for the first 2 weeks. Sofia got her to talk again. The office falls silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Luca sits completely still, watching the footage loop again and again. The woman in the stained uniform. The child in the pink nightgown. The shelter of 2 bodies against the storm. He thinks of the night Emma disappeared. He was in Milan, closing a deal that would expand his territory across 3 new districts. He was away for 48 hours. When he returned to the penthouse, she was gone. The nanny was gone. There was blood on the marble floor of the nursery, not Emma's blood, thank God, but enough to tell him that a struggle had occurred. Enough to tell him that someone had taken her by force. His own brother, Raphael, had orchestrated the kidnapping. Raphael, who wanted control of the empire. Raphael, who believed that holding Emma would force Luca to step down. Raphael, who underestimated his older brother's capacity for vengeance. Raphael had paid with his life. But Emma had paid with something worse than death. She had paid with 18 months of captivity, of being held by people who did not love her, of living in darkness without knowing her own name. And now a woman with no resources, no power, no connections to his world had found her. Had protected her. Had given her something that Luca, with all his money and all his violence and all his empire, could not give her: safety. Shelter. The touch of someone who did not want to use her. Someone who simply loved her? Bring them both to me, Luca says. Both of them, sir. Bruno's surprise flickers across his face for exactly 1 second before he controls it. The woman has nothing to do with. Both of them, Luca repeats. Tonight. Bruno nods and leaves the office. Luca returns to watching the footage. The woman crouches beside his daughter in the doorway of the bakery, and even through the grainy security video, he can see her mouth moving. He can see her lips forming words. He can see his daughter's small hand reaching up to touch the woman's face. This moment, Luca understands, has already changed everything. Now, let us go back 3 weeks earlier. To the moment Sofia Morgan first encountered Emma at Harbor Street Shelter on a Tuesday evening in late September. The shelter smells like industrial cleaner and despair. Grey linoleum floors. Fluorescent lights that hum with a frequency that makes your teeth ache after 8 hours of exposure. The check-in counter is staffed by Margaret, a woman in her 60s who has seen every variety of human suffering and responded to all of it with the same warm, exhausted compassion. Sofia arrives at 5:17 in the afternoon with her backpack slung across her shoulders. The backpack contains everything she owns: 1 extra pair of jeans, 3 shirts, 7 pairs of underwear, a toothbrush, 1 bra, socks with holes in them, a photograph of a woman who might be her mother but whom she has not seen in 6 years, and a worn prayer card that belonged to her grandmother. The card is laminated. The edges are soft from being handled 1,000 times. On it is printed St. Jude, patron saint of impossible cases. On the back, in handwriting so old it has faded to grey, are words: when all else fails, pray. When prayer fails, love. When love fails, move forward anyway. Sofia carries this card like a talisman. Like a blade wrapped in grace. Bed 17 is yours tonight, Margaret says, handing her a key. Checkout is at 7 tomorrow morning. Breakfast at 6:30 in the cafeteria. If you need anything, my office is in the back. Sofia nods. She has been coming to this shelter for 8 weeks. 8 weeks since the apartment building where she rented a basement studio received an eviction notice. 8 weeks since the landlord decided he would rather have the building condemned than maintain it. 8 weeks since Sofia realized that the money she had saved, carefully, penny by penny, working triple shifts, would not be enough to cover both a deposit and first month's rent in any neighborhood she could reach by bus. So she sleeps in her 2004 Honda Civic in the parking lot. During the day, she works. At night, she checks into the shelter so she can use the shower, so she can sleep somewhere that is not a car, so she can pretend for 7 hours that she is not becoming invisible. The dormitory is a long room with 20 beds in tight rows. 17 is in the corner, which is better than some positions, because it has a view of the window. During the day, if you position yourself carefully, you can see the sky. Sofia is putting her backpack under the bed when she hears crying. It is not loud crying. It is the kind of crying that comes from a child who has learned that crying does not bring help. Soft crying. Hopeless crying. The sound comes from bed 5, across the room. Sofia looks over. A small girl sits on the edge of the thin mattress, her shoulders shaking silently, her face turned away. She is very thin. Her dark hair is tangled in a way that suggests no one has brushed it in days. She wears a shelter-issue shirt that is too large for her body. Sofia has learned, in her 28 years, that there are people she can help and people she cannot help. She has learned that charity is often cruelty wearing a kind face. She has learned to keep her distance. But she was 6 years old once. She remembers what 6 years old feels like. She remembers the darkness of not having anyone in the world who knows your name. Sofia walks across the dormitory and sits on the edge of the girl's bed. The girl flinches. She turns away. "It is okay," Sofia says. Her voice is soft. Not soft in a way that sounds afraid, but soft in a way that says I understand. You do not have to talk. I am Sofia. I sleep in bed 17. The girl does not respond. I was crying like that 3 weeks ago, Sofia continues. I was in my car. It was raining. I thought my life could not get any worse. And then it did. But then I realized something. The girl glances sideways at Sofia but does not speak. The rain always stops, Sofia says. It does not matter how hard it is falling. The rain always stops. The girl's breathing slows. Still, she does not speak. My name is Sofia, Sofia says again, even more softly. What is your name? A very long pause. Then, so quietly that Sofia almost misses it, a single word, Emma. Emma, Sofia repeats, as if the name is sacred. As if saying it correctly is the most important thing she will do today. That is a beautiful name. And in that moment, something shifts. Emma does not smile. She does not suddenly become healed. But she nods, very slightly. She leans her small body sideways until her shoulder touches Sofia's arm. They sit like that in the grey light of the shelter, two people with no one in the world, and the world becomes a little bit less lonely. Meanwhile, at the Caruso penthouse, Luca receives reports that his brother's organization is beginning to fracture. 2 capos have disappeared. 3 street-level dealers have been arrested with enough evidence to keep them in prison for decades. His supply lines are being systematically dismantled, not by law enforcement, but by someone methodical, patient, and infinitely more dangerous. It is Luca's work. It has taken 18 months, but every person involved in Emma's kidnapping will be erased from the world. Not quickly. Not mercifully. But thoroughly. He stands at his office window looking out over Boston, and he thinks about the woman in the stained uniform, and he wonders what it would take to break someone that gentle. And he realizes, with the certainty of a man who has destroyed empires, that he never wants to find out. 3 weeks before the diner at 3 in the morning, before the rain, before Luca Caruso would reach for her in the dark, Sofia Morgan woke at 5:47 a.m. in the backseat of her Honda Civic, her spine curved like a question mark against the vinyl seat, every joint screaming. Condensation dripped from the windows in slow, deliberate drops. She lay still for a moment, listening to the parking lot of Harbor Street shelter come alive, car doors slamming, voices calling to each other, the distant sound of the city beginning its indifferent march forward. She sat up slowly. Her neck cracked. She counted the money in her pocket with the precision of a woman for whom mathematics meant survival: 3 20s, 1 10, 8 1s. $78. This was all that stood between her and absolute nothing. She held the bills in her trembling hand and felt the weight of them like a blade pressed against her throat. The Shell Station bathroom on Atlantic Avenue smelled like bleach and human despair. Sofia locked the door behind her and ran water that came out rust-colored at first, then gradually clearer. She washed her face and her armpits with paper towels and hand soap that tore her skin. The mirror showed her a woman she barely recognized, dark circles shadowing eyes that used to be bright, her hair pulled back so tight it made her scalp ache. 28 years old but looking decades older, like someone had poured years into her face and forgotten to pour anything back out. She changed into her cleanest shirt from the backpack, the one without permanent stains. Every possession she owned fit inside that bag, which cost $9 at a thrift store in 2019, 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans with a hole in the right knee, 3 pairs of underwear, a bra with elastic coming loose, a toothbrush with frayed bristles, a bar of soap wrapped in plastic, and at the very bottom, protected in a Ziploc bag, a prayer card her grandmother had given her 15 years ago. The card showed St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. It was worn thin from being handled. She was certain God had stopped listening to her prayers sometime around the eviction notice. Luigi's restaurant on Waterfront Drive was all checkered floors and red vinyl booths and the smell of bacon grease that had soaked into the walls so thoroughly that you tasted it on your tongue for hours after leaving. Sofia arrived at 6 in the morning for the breakfast shift, her shoes wet from the walk through puddles she could not afford to avoid. Douglas Hale was already there, counting the register behind the bar. He was 42, with thinning hair he combed straight back and a wedding ring he never mentioned, a man shaped by small cruelties and smaller satisfactions. He watched her tie her apron. He watched her gather the coffee pot and begin filling cups at the corner tables. His eyes followed her like a predator's, patient and certain that eventually he would succeed in whatever he wanted to take. The breakfast crowd came in around 7, construction workers in dusty boots, elderly couples who came because they had nowhere else to go, delivery drivers between routes. Sofia moved through them like a ghost, carrying plates of eggs and bacon and hash browns, refilling coffee cups, offering genuine smiles she did not feel. At 2 o'clock, when her shift ended, she approached the tip jar. Her hand shook as she opened it. She had counted the bills during her break, written the number in her small notebook, $43. Enough to stretch her remaining funds another week. Enough to buy Emma the new shoes she needed, the ones with the hole in the sole. Inside the jar now, $18. $25 gone. You must have miscounted, sweetheart, Douglas said from behind the bar, not looking at her, his voice wrapped in the particular smile of a man who enjoyed taking things. Always doing that. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the jar against the wall and watch the coin scatter across the red tile. She wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting her, the way the world had hurt her, the way life kept hurting her no matter how hard she worked, no matter how many hours she sacrificed, no matter how small she tried to make herself. Instead, Sofia Morgan, who had learned at an early age that survival required silence, said nothing. She put the $18 in her pocket and walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling the weight of Douglas Hale's satisfied smile like a hand pressing against her back. Harbor Street shelter smelled like institutional soap and the particular sadness of rooms where nobody wanted to be. Sofia entered through the side door and moved toward the women's sleeping area, a large room with 40 cots arranged in rows like a warehouse of broken things. Most people avoided the sleeping area in daylight. The fluorescent lights were too bright. They made you see yourself too clearly. Emma sat in the corner, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. The rabbit looked as damaged as everything else in this room. The girl was 6 years old, maybe 7, her skin the color of old coffee, her eyes holding the kind of knowledge that children should never possess. No one knew her last name. No family had come looking for her in the 3 weeks she had been at the shelter. No records existed. It was as if Emma had simply appeared one morning, fully formed and completely alone, like a ghost that had learned to breathe. The other women avoided her. Children reminded them too much of what they had lost. Sofia sat down on the cot beside Emma without asking permission. "Hello," she said. "My name is Sofia." Emma did not respond. She pulled the rabbit closer to her chest, her small fingers gripping its grey fur. "I know you do not want to talk," Sofia said. "That is okay. I do not want to talk much either." She opened her backpack and removed a sandwich she had wrapped in plastic from her shift, turkey and mustard, the crusts cut off. "Are you hungry?" Emma's eyes followed the sandwich, but she did not reach for it. "My grandmother used to say that some days the rain falls so hard you think it will never stop," Sofia continued, speaking to no one and everyone at once. "It did. But then I realized something." The girl glanced sideways at Sofia but did not speak. "The rain always stops," Sofia said. "It does not matter how hard it is falling. The rain always stops." Emma's breathing slowed. Her grip on the rabbit loosened by a fraction of an inch. "My name is Sofia," Sofia said again, even more softly. "What is your name?" A very long pause. The sounds of the shelter moved around them like water, footsteps in the hallway, someone crying in a distant room, the hum of broken air conditioning. Then so quietly that Sofia almost missed it, a single word escaped from Emma's lips like a bird from a cage. "Emma." "Emma," Sofia repeated, as if the name was sacred. As if saying it correctly was the most important thing she would do today. "That is a beautiful name." The girl did not smile. She did not suddenly become healed. But she nodded, very slightly. She leaned her small body sideways until her shoulder touched Sofia's arm. They sat like that in the grey light of the shelter, two people with no one in the world, and the world became a little bit less lonely. For 3 weeks after that afternoon, Sofia protected Emma with the ferocity of a mother. She walked her to the shelter's outdoor play area, stood between her and the other children who did not understand gentleness. She braided her hair at night, her own fingers clumsy but patient. She told her stories about princesses and forests and houses with warm kitchens where someone was always there. Emma never spoke about where she came from. She never mentioned her father or the bad men or anything before the day she arrived at Harbor Street with nothing but a stuffed rabbit and a name. Until the night everything changed. Emma was lying on her cot, Sofia sitting beside her in the darkness. Most of the other women were already asleep, their breathing rising and falling like waves. Emma reached out and took Sofia's hand. Her palm was so small it fit inside Sofia's without touching the edges. "My papa is looking for me," Emma whispered. "Bad men took me. But papa will find me." Sofia's blood froze. Her heart stopped, then started again, racing. "Emma, where is your papa?" But Emma had already retreated back into silence. She closed her eyes and within minutes her breathing deepened into sleep. Sofia sat there for hours, holding the small hand in hers, understanding in that moment that something was coming. Something large and dangerous and inevitable. Something that would destroy the fragile world she had built in this shelter, in those early morning conversations, in the simple act of being wanted by one small person. She had no idea that Luca Caruso had spent 18 months and $2 million searching for his daughter. She had no idea that his brother Marco had been the one who sold Emma's location to rivals who wanted to destroy him. She had no idea that at that very moment, 23 floors above the city in a penthouse office, Luca was receiving a photograph of his daughter alive, being held by a night shift waitress in a stained uniform, and that something cold and dangerous was stirring in his chest. The black and white checkered floor, the hum of dying neon lights, the stale smell of coffee and grease hanging heavy in the silence, and 3 dangerous men in suits that cost more than everything she owned went absolutely still. Sofia Morgan lay crumpled near the door of Donna's diner at 3:13 in the morning, her body folded like a discarded piece of paper. One eye swollen shut, handprints bruised dark purple around her throat, blood from a split lip mixing with rainwater that dripped from her soaked uniform. Thunder cracked outside, splitting the sky open. The downpour hammered against the windows like fists demanding entry. In the back booth, a man stood. Luca Caruso rose from his seat with the deliberate grace of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 6'2", dark suit tailored to precision, white shirt open at the collar revealing the muscular chest beneath. His hair was black, silvered slightly at the temples. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade wrapped in ice. On his right hand, a gold signet ring caught the fluorescent light. He was 38 years old but looked carved from stone, the kind of man who had learned long ago that showing emotion was a luxury he could not afford. Until he looked at the bleeding woman on his floor. Something shifted in his expression. Something that made the two men who had just entered the diner, Bruno, stocky and scarred, and Franco, lean with calculating eyes, exchange a look neither had seen in 15 years of working for him. Luca knelt beside Sofia without hesitation. His expensive suit soaked up dirty rainwater as he reached down and lifted her chin with surprising gentleness. His voice came quiet and controlled, each word weighted like an oath. "Who did this to you?" Sofia tried to pull away, but her body would not obey. She was shaking too hard, adrenaline crashing through her system like a breaking wave. Through her working eye, she saw his face above hers, dark, intense, waiting for an answer. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just need to go." Luca's jaw tightened. "You're bleeding on my table. You have bruises in the shape of fingers on your throat. And you are not fine." The words were steel wrapped in silk. He turned to Bruno without looking away from Sofia. "First aid kit from the car. Black coffee, no sugar." Bruno disappeared. Franco remained by the door, watching, his hand resting near his jacket in a movement so subtle most people would not have noticed. But Sofia noticed. She noticed everything about these men, the way they moved, the way they deferred to Luca with a single glance, the way silence followed them like a second shadow. Luca sat across from her in the booth. He did not speak. He simply waited, the way a predator waits. His phone buzzed twice. He ignored it. Bruno returned with a first aid kit and a steaming mug of black coffee. He set them on the table, and his eyes met Luca's for a fraction of a second before he withdrew to stand near Franco. Neither man had ever seen their boss touch a stranger this way. Neither man had ever seen him show this kind of concern for anyone outside his immediate circle. Sofia wrapped her trembling hands around the coffee mug. The warmth was a shock against her cold skin. She tried to deflect. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come in here. I'll leave." "You're not leaving," Luca said. "Not a question. Not a request." Sofia looked at him, and in that moment, something broke inside her. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in 3 years, someone was sitting across from her like she mattered. She opened her mouth and everything poured out. She told him about Douglas Hale stealing from her for weeks. She told him about tonight, how she had confronted Douglas in his office, how his expression had changed when she demanded her money back. How he had grabbed her wrist and twisted it. How his hand had wrapped around her throat so tightly she could not breathe. How his voice had been venom in her ear, "You're nobody. You're homeless trash. Who's going to believe you?" She told him about running into the rain. About having nowhere to go because she could not show up at the Harbor Street shelter looking like this, because the questions would come and the authorities would come, and she did not have the luxury of being believed. She told him about the $78 in her backpack. About washing her face in gas station bathrooms. About sleeping in her rusted Honda parked 3 blocks from the shelter. About carrying everything she owned in one worn backpack because she had no home. Luca listened without interrupting. His dark eyes never left her face. When she finally finished, her voice cracking on the last word, he leaned back slightly. The fluorescent light caught the scar on his cheekbone. "You saved my daughter," he said. Sofia's working eye widened. "What?" "Emma. 6 years old. Pink nightgown. You protected her at Harbor Street shelter 3 weeks ago when she had no one. Luca's voice was steady, factual. That creates a debt. Sofia's laugh was bitter, broken. I don't want your money. I don't want to owe anyone anything. Too late, Luca said. You already owe me $22,000. The words hit Sofia like a physical blow. She went pale, her grip loosening on the coffee mug. What? What do you mean? Luca explained in precise, measured sentences. Emma's medical evaluation after she was found had cost $18,000. Security detail to watch the shelter where Sofia was staying had cost $4,000 more. You involved yourself in my world when you protected her. Now you pay the price. Sofia's voice cracked. I don't have $22,000. I have 78. She pulled the crumpled bills from her pocket with shaking hands and slammed them on the table. They scattered like dead leaves. That's it. That's everything I have. Luca picked up the bills slowly. He counted them, holding each one between his fingers as if they might disintegrate. He counted all $78. Then he set them back down on the checkered table and looked at Sofia with an expression she could not read. Then I'll offer you another way to pay, he said. Stay close to Emma. She trusts you. She's been asking for you every day since you brought her to the shelter. Move into the guest house on my property. Work with her. Let me handle the man who did this to you. Consider it payment. Sofia stared at him. The rain continued hammering against the windows. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, the scar, the sharp cheekbones, the eyes that held no mercy and yet, somehow, some infinite well of something else. Something she could not name. Why would you help me? She whispered. I'm nobody. Luca's eyes darkened. When he spoke, his voice came like thunder, deep and solid. You're the woman who saved my daughter without asking for anything in return. In my world, that makes you rarer than diamonds. Nobody matters less. You matter to her. That means you matter to me. Franco shifted near the door, and even Bruno, standing near the counter with the empty first aid kit, exchanged a glance that said the same thing: something has changed tonight. Something that will never be the same. Sofia touched the worn prayer card in her pocket, her grandmother's card, creased and faded, the only thing she had left of any family at all. She pulled it out with trembling fingers and it fell onto the table between them. Luca picked it up. He studied the faded image, the barely legible words beneath. What is this? My grandmother's, Sofia whispered. It's all I have left of family. Luca handed it back to her with surprising care. Then keep it safe. He slid a card across the table. An address in Back Bay, embossed in gold letters that caught the light. Bruno will drive you there. Emma will be awake in 3 hours. She'll want to see you. As Sofia rose, dizzy, exhausted, her whole body aching, she asked the question she had to ask. What are you going to do to him? To Douglas. Luca stood as well. He straightened his suit jacket, which was now soaked with rainwater and blood. His expression became absolutely unreadable, the face of a man who had learned to hide everything except power. What he should have feared from the beginning, Luca said quietly. He gestured to Bruno with a single movement of his hand. 3 blocks away, in the penthouse office of the Harborview Hotel overlooking Boston Harbor, Catherine Mercer poured herself a glass of scotch. 54 years old, platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe knot, diamond earrings that caught the pre-dawn light coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She wore a tailored white suit that probably cost more than Sofia's entire wardrobe multiplied by 10. Across from her, Douglas Hale sat sweating through his shirt, his face flushed with panic and rage. She fought back, he said, his voice rising. She ran. What if she reports me to the police? What if? Catherine raised one hand. Her nails were painted red. Her expression was ice. She's homeless, Douglas. No permanent address. No credibility. No one will believe her testimony over yours. She took a slow sip of scotch. But we cannot have loose ends. What do you want me to do? Douglas asked. Catherine smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. Find her. Make sure she understands the consequences of speaking out. Make sure she knows that if she opens her mouth, if she tells anyone what happened tonight, there will be nothing left of her life but regret. Douglas nodded, relief washing over his face. And Douglas, Catherine added, her voice dropping to something colder still, if she's already talked to someone important, if she's already set things in motion that we cannot undo, then we eliminate the problem entirely. Back at Donna's diner, Sofia slid into the back seat of Luca's black Mercedes. Bruno sat in the driver's seat, his scarred hands gripping the steering wheel. The engine started with a whisper of expensive machinery. The city blurred past, the amber glow of streetlights, the dark shapes of buildings, the rain cascading down the windows in rivulets. Sofia held her grandmother's prayer card in one hand and looked down at the $78 Luca had handed back to her with her things. He had not needed them. He had already given her something far more valuable than money. He had given her a reason to stop running. Thunder rolled across the sky as Bruno drove deeper into Boston. Sofia did not know what waited for her at the address on that gold-embossed card. She did not know that Luca Caruso had spent 18 months and $2 million searching for his daughter. She did not know that his own brother had betrayed him, had sold Emma's location to rivals who wanted to destroy him. She did not know that in choosing to help her, Luca had set forces in motion that would shake the entire city. But she would learn. The rain continued. The storm raged. And Sofia Morgan, who had slept in a rusted Honda, who had washed her face in gas station bathrooms, who had carried everything she owned in a backpack and $78 in her pocket, Sofia Morgan was about to discover that the world was far more dangerous and far more capable of mercy than she had ever imagined. The guest house sat silent at 2 in the morning, rain beginning to fall in cold, deliberate drops against the windows. Sofia sat on the concrete steps leading down from the side door, her legs pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself. The prayer card trembled in her left hand, her grandmother's words barely visible in the darkness, faded ink on aged paper that had traveled 1,000 miles with her. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the property gates, still distant but approaching, the sky bruised purple and black. She was shaking. Not from the cold, though the November air bit at her exposed skin, at her neck and wrists and the hollow of her throat. The shaking came from somewhere deeper, from a place inside her that understood what she had become. A woman who had drawn a child into danger. A woman who had accepted protection from a man whose mercy was built on the suffering of others. A woman who had traded her invisibility for something far more complicated than safety. The rain fell harder. Each drop hit like a small accusation. Sofia whispered the words from the prayer card, though she could not read them anymore. Her grandmother's voice echoed across 15 years of absence, "You are stronger than you think." But Sofia did not feel strong. She felt like a current had seized her and was pulling her under, pulling her deeper into darkness she did not understand and could not navigate. Inside the guest house, behind walls thick enough to muffle a gunshot, Emma slept in the room next to hers. Emma with her haunted eyes, her small hand reaching out in the dark to make sure Sofia was still there. Emma, who had already lost 18 months to captivity, already suffered things no 6-year-old should endure. And Sofia had brought her closer to the edge. She stood, her legs unsteady, and walked toward the fence line where the property dissolved into unlit woods. The rain intensified. Wind tore through the bare trees like something with teeth. She reached the gate, her hand closing around the cold metal. One push. The gate was locked from the inside, but locks could be climbed. Fences could be crossed. She could disappear. Walk back to the old life, to the rusted Honda waiting somewhere in the city, to the routine of small rooms and smaller meals. She could remove herself from this equation, from the violence that radiated outward from Luca Caruso like heat from a furnace. One step toward the gate. Then two. That was when she heard it. A child's voice, high and trembling, calling from inside the house. Not screaming. Not urgent. But afraid. "Vivi? Vivi, where are you?" "Emma." crying in the dark because of the thunder, calling for Sofia with the desperation of a child who had already been abandoned too many times. Sofia closed her eyes. The rain fell on her face like tears she could no longer cry. She turned back. At 5:47 in the morning, the fog hung over the city like a burial shroud. 12 men in black tactical gear moved through that fog without sound, their boots making no noise on wet pavement, their weapons held at ready angles. They moved like they had rehearsed this exact formation 1,000 times. They moved like ghosts. The first target was a 4-story walk-up in Dorchester. Douglas Hale lived on the 3rd floor in a studio apartment that smelled of microwaved food and desperation. He woke to the sound of his door frame splintering, woke gasping as 6 men surrounded his bed with rifles held steady. "Please, please, I didn't mean." He did not finish. Bruno stepped forward, and Douglas saw recognition bloom in his eyes. Recognition and the understanding that death had finally come collecting. Douglas scrambled backward, his body tangling in sheets, his legs pumping uselessly against the mattress. He fell onto the floor. He began to beg. "I have money. I'll pay anything. Please, just tell me what you want and I'll." Bruno's smile contained no warmth. "You touched something that belongs to Luca Caruso. That makes you collateral. That makes you broken equipment." The zip ties bit into Douglas's wrists. They were plastic, industrial grade, meant to hold things immobilized. He screamed as they tightened. His neighbors heard him through the walls but did not intervene. In this neighborhood, screams in the early morning meant mind your business or become involved. Douglas Hale disappeared into a black Mercedes van at 6:03. By 6:15, no one who mattered would ever see him again. At the same hour, federal agents were gathering outside the Harborview Hotel. 12 vehicles. 40 agents. Search warrants signed by a federal judge that detailed 8 years of money laundering, employee exploitation across 4 properties, and financial crimes that stretched back to the time Catherine Mercer was still learning which fork to use at dinner. Luca Caruso had made one phone call to a prosecutor named Patricia Chen, a woman whose daughter had required a $28,000 surgery 5 years ago, a surgery that Luca had paid for in full with a single anonymous wire transfer and no expectation of repayment. Patricia Chen remembered that moment. She had never forgotten it. The raid came at 6:14. Catherine Mercer was in her penthouse office, already dressed in a silk robe the color of champagne, her hair perfect, her face prepared for the day ahead. She was reviewing financials when the agents came through her door like an avalanche. "Step away from the desk." Slowly. Catherine's face did not change. It was a mask of composure, the face of a woman accustomed to controlling every variable in every room. Then she saw the photographs being held up. Her wire transfers. Her ledgers. Her connections to Douglas Hale's theft scheme, expanded and systematized across all her properties, a coordinated operation that had stolen over $300,000 from her own employees over nearly a decade. The mask cracked. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what I can do to you?" Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. "I will destroy every one of you. My lawyers will." "You have the right to remain silent," the lead agent said. "I recommend you exercise that right." The handcuffs closed around her wrists with a click that echoed through the penthouse. Catherine Mercer, who had worn designer clothes and walked through doors that closed behind her, who had orchestrated the isolation and abuse of a homeless woman with the ease of turning a page, was led through her own hotel lobby in silver bracelets. The perp walk was recorded, shared, uploaded. By 8 in the morning, the story had spread through 40 news stations. By 9, it was trending nationally. By noon, her social circle had begun the systematic process of erasing her from their collective memory, the way very wealthy people do, not with violence, but with absence, with calls that no longer came, with invitations that no longer arrived, with a silence so complete it felt like death. 40 years minimum. That was what the assistant district attorney said in a press conference. 40 years for Catherine Mercer to understand what her actions had cost. Luca sat in his study at 8:23 in the morning, watching 3 screens display the news simultaneously. Catherine's arrest played on one. On another, a different story, Douglas Hale identified as a person of interest in a dockside murder investigation, his photograph circulating among the crime syndicates that ran Boston's ports. On the third, Sofia's face from the shelter, a photo someone had leaked, a narrative forming about a homeless woman who had protected a missing child. Bruno entered without knocking. In 15 years of service, Bruno had earned the right to enter any room in Luca's world without permission. "It's done," Bruno said. "Douglas is with the Rossetti family." They had questions. He provided answers. He will continue to provide answers for some time. After that, Luca did not require specifics. After that was a conversation that ended in permanent silence. Catherine Mercer. Federal custody. Her accounts frozen. Her lawyers retreating. Her reputation is ash. Luca finally turned from the screens. His face was expression neutral, but something in his eyes had shifted. Something cold and final, like a door closing in a room no one would ever enter again. Death would be too quick, Luca said. Too easy. Too merciful. I wanted them to live with what they did. I wanted them to understand what it means to be powerless. To have everything stripped away and realize there is no one coming to save you. Bruno understood. He had watched Luca operate for 15 years. He had learned that mercy was not the absence of violence. Mercy was knowing exactly how much damage to inflict so that death became a mercy rather than a curse. Sofia learned of it all at breakfast. She brought Emma down to the kitchen where sunlight was finally breaking through the storm clouds, where a cook named Antonio was preparing eggs and toast and fresh fruit arranged on white ceramic plates. The television in the corner, always playing softly, was displaying Catherine Mercer in handcuffs. Sofia's hand froze. The bowl of fruit she was holding tilted. Strawberries tumbled across the marble counter. Catherine Mercer, perp, walked through her own hotel. Catherine Mercer, whose face was now known to millions. Catherine Mercer, whose empire was disintegrating in real time. Sofia turned to find Luca standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read. "You did this," Sofia whispered. "I told you I would handle it." Sofia's voice was barely audible, shattered like glass. "I didn't ask you to destroy them." Luca walked to her. He was close enough that she could smell him, expensive cologne and coffee and something darker underneath, something that reminded her of smoke and old money and authority. He reached out and tilted her chin upward with one finger. "You didn't have to ask," he said. "You saved my daughter. That makes you mine to protect. Anyone who hurts what is mine learns the same lesson." Sofia should have been terrified. She should have pulled away, should have recognized the danger radiating from him. Instead, she felt something twist inside her chest, something dangerous, something dark that recognized itself in him. She was beginning to understand. Understanding was not the same as approval. But it was the beginning of something else entirely. Something she was not prepared to name. Emma tugged on Sofia's sleeve. "Is the lady who was mean going away?" Sofia knelt beside the child, her hands on small shoulders. "Yes, baby. She is going away for a very long time." "Good," Emma said simply. "Now she cannot hurt you anymore." The child's logic was absolute. The child was right. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The storm was passing. The sky was beginning to clear. 1 week later, the rain had finally stopped. Sofia sat in Luca's garden as the sun descended toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Emma sat cross-legged beside her, drawing flowers with colored pencils, purple ones, yellow ones, pink ones that looked nothing like any flower in nature but were perfect anyway. Sofia still carried the $78 in her pocket. Not because she needed it anymore. Because it reminded her who she had been. The guest house sat 100 meters away, her name on the lease now, her clothes in the closet, her toothbrush in the bathroom. She had moved in 3 days ago. Emma had refused to let her leave, and Luca had insisted, and Sofia had finally stopped pretending she had anywhere else to go. Footsteps approached on the garden path. Measured, unhurried, the footsteps of a man accustomed to waiting for the world. Luca carried an envelope in one hand. His suit was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbows. For a man who commanded an empire, he moved like someone settling into a quiet evening, like he had nowhere else to be, like his business could wait, like this moment mattered more than the phone that surely sat silent in his pocket. "For you," he said, extending the envelope. Sofia opened it. Inside was a check. She looked at the numbers once, then again, then a third time, because numbers that large did not exist in her world. $50,000. The check nearly slipped from her fingers. "I can't accept this." "You can." Luca sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could smell him, expensive cologne, coffee, the faint metallic undertone of authority. "You saved my daughter. Consider it back payment for 3 weeks of protection. And hazard pay for what Douglas Hale did." Sofia shook her head, the check trembling between her hands. "This is too much. The debt you said I owed, $22,000. Was a test." Luca's voice dropped lower. "To see if you would run or if you would stay." "A test," Sofia repeated. "You stayed. Even when you were terrified. Even when I gave you reason to leave. You stayed for Emma." He paused. "That told me everything I needed to know about who you are." Sofia's voice cracked across the single word, "Who?" "Someone worth saving." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Sofia, are you staying forever?" Sofia looked at Luca, then back at the child. "If you'll have me." "Always," Emma said simply, returning to her flowers. Luca said nothing, but his hand moved across the space between them. Not touching. Just present. Just there. That evening, Bruno and Franco watched from the patio as Luca, Sofia, and Emma ate dinner together in the garden. A simple dinner, pasta, fresh bread, salad from the grounds. Nothing that required explanation or justification. Franco shook his head, barely audible. "In 15 years. I have never seen him like this." Bruno's smile was slight, almost invisible. Not soft. Healing. There is a difference. Later, after Emma was asleep and the dishes were cleared, Luca took Sofia to his study. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds. A desk of dark wood. Shelves that held books he actually read, not decoration. A security monitor mounted on the wall, currently displaying an empty hallway. He pulled up a file. Pressed play. The screen came alive with footage from the shelter parking lot, date stamped 18 months ago. Thunder split the night sky. Rain hammered the pavement. And there are Sofia. Younger looking, thinner, moving through the storm with her jacket already off, already wrapping it around a small crying figure. "I watched this 50 times, Luca said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Trying to understand why you did it. You had nothing. You were barely surviving. And you gave everything to protect a stranger's child." Sofia watched herself on the screen, cradling Emma, singing softly despite her own terror. "Because no child should be that afraid," Sofia said finally. "And no child should be alone." Luca turned to her. "You saved her on the worst night of my life. My brother Marco had just disappeared. I thought I would never see my daughter again. And then a call came, Emma was alive, and she had been raised by a homeless woman in a shelter, a woman who had nothing and gave her everything anyway." He paused. "I saved you on the worst night of yours. We are bound now. By shared darkness. By survival. By what we have both lost and what we refuse to lose again." Sofia met his eyes. They were storm grey in the lamplight, dark and penetrating and impossibly gentle. "I am not afraid of your darkness anymore," Sofia said. "You should be. Maybe. But I am not." And in that moment, the feared Mafia boss and the homeless woman understood something neither had expected. They were not falling in love. They were becoming each other's salvation. Two people who had tasted darkness and refused to let it consume them. Two people who had learned that mercy and strength are not opposites. They are the same thing. 3 months later. Sofia tucked Emma into bed, just as she had done in the shelter months ago. The child held her stuffed rabbit, a new one, purchased from the boutique on Newbury Street, but Emma had named it something fierce, Warrior Bunny. "Sofia, do you still have your prayer card?" "The one from your grandma." Sofia pulled it from her pocket. "Still worn. Still creased." The words faded but legible. "The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think." "Always," Sofia said. "What does it say?" Sofia read the words aloud, and Emma listened with the absolute attention only children possess. "Grandma was right," Emma whispered. "You are strong. You saved me. And Papa says you saved him too." Sofia kissed the child's forehead. "You saved me first, sweet girl. You gave me a reason to keep going." Emma's eyes drifted closed. Within moments, she was asleep. Luca stood in the doorway, watching. After Sofia emerged and closed the door softly, they walked together down the hallway. They stopped before her room. Close but not touching. A hesitation that meant something. A space that carried its own language. "I never thanked you properly," Luca said. "For giving me my daughter back. For staying when most would have run. For not letting the darkness win." Sofia smiled. "I never thanked you for giving me a reason to stop running." Luca reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, deliberate, the hand of a man accustomed to violence learning how to be tender. "You are not homeless anymore, Sofia Morgan. You are home." Sofia's eyes glistened. "So are you." This is the story of two people who met in darkness and chose light. Sofia Morgan had $78 when she saved a child in the rain. Douglas Hale is serving 20 years in federal prison. Catherine Mercer's empire dissolved within weeks of her arrest, her assets seized, her hotel shuttered, her name erased from the social registers where she had once wielded so much power. Sofia keeps the $78 framed on her bedroom wall. A reminder. Not of what she has lost, but of how far she has come. She works now, not from desperation but from purpose. She created the Harbor House Foundation, offering shelter and education to women and children in crisis. Every dollar that comes in goes directly to them. She still wears her old delivery uniform sometimes, hanging it on the wall of her office, a testament to survival. Emma thrives. Laughter now. Joy. Safety. A child who was once haunted by fear is becoming someone luminous. And Luca Caruso, the feared Mafia boss who built an empire on vengeance, learned that the most powerful thing he could ever protect is not territory or money, not power or legacy. It is the woman who showed him that mercy and strength are not opposites. When the storm came, Sofia did not run from it. She ran toward the child crying in the rain. That made all the difference. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Subscribe and turn on notifications because tomorrow we have another story for you. Drop a comment telling us, what would you have done in Sofia's place? Would you have run toward the crying child or kept walking? Your answer might surprise you. Thank you for watching. Remember, the storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think.